This podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation. This is Gary Minchell, and it's Gary on Manufacturing. And I've been all kinds of places in the last couple of weeks. I did not get a report done from Hanover Messe. The biggest things I saw at Hanover, that was 2 weeks ago. I'm recording this on Wednesday, and I think it's somewhere around the 11th of May. And I'm in the United Club at McCarron International Airport in Las Vegas, finishing up a Dell conference. 2 weeks ago was Hanover, Germany, and I forgot to turn the recording on while I was in the Messe Gelände in Hanover. But a lot going on there on Internet of Things platforms, some proprietary, interesting, but all encompassing within the fold of the particular company. Specifically, I ran into SAP, ExoSite, and Cisco. Microsoft also had one. Microsoft is a little more open than the others. They have some open source components, some open connectivity, although they base things on the Azure cloud, of course. And they also have developed their own IoT center. But other than that, more openness there. And the interesting news was a deeper dive into what Dell EMC has done with their open source project called EdgeX Foundry, uh, in conjunction with the Linux Foundation, which is a host site for open source projects. So you should see the complex mind map I have of what I need to say coming from the Dell EMC conference. This is technically the second conference that they did after Dell acquired EMC, and I think it's the largest private equity or private company acquisition like ever. A huge company. I think I saw $67 billion acquisition or company. Now I forget, but it's a huge company and a lot going on. So Dell, you think of as a PC company, and they did mention PCs. And as I was walking through the expo part of the conference with my MacBook Air, one of the nice guys in one of the stands tried to sell me a Lenovo, not Lenovo, on the Dell, a Latitude, starts with L, laptop, which looks pretty cool, by the way. And he said Windows 10 is pretty stable, and he likes it, and it goes pretty well. So I don't know. Maybe in the future I look into a Dell notebook. I tell you, there's a couple of them that are pretty cool looking things. And while I'm briefly on hardware, they were showing something called the Dell Canvas. It's an input device. In the old days, we would have called it a digitizer. It's not really for CAD, I don't think. I didn't ask him, I didn't get a chance. But definitely for sketching and drawing and artists, fantastic for sure. And I'll have to dive deeper into that and see what it looks like. Some of the stuff they were showing at the keynotes with the Canvas and Nike, the shoe company, looked an awful lot like digital twin technology. They didn't really talk about the digital twin, but there was parts of it there. So diving into Michael Dell's keynote address, there was quite a bit he said, and basically I think I would boil it down to saying that one message is definitely that he wants to get across that the integration of the two major companies is coming along very well. And they'd already been doing some things in October at the Dell EMC World, which was the first one. It was right after the acquisition, and they were coming together. They already had some products, joint products together. The teams are coming together. It really looked like one seamless organization, quite frankly. And there was no undercurrent whatsoever of anything like I'm used to hearing in some of the acquisitions in the automation space. Very interesting, pretty cool. So he got that across quite a bit. And then they wanted to do a lot of branding, like what is Dell Technologies, the parent company. and then all the different brands like Dell EMC for servers and other things, Dell, which is PCs, um, and there's VMware and other aspects that I really don't know as much about. They're not in my spot. But Michael Dell pointed out that the company is a leader in 15 Gartner Magic Quadrants. They make huge investments in R&D, which is what a private company will do that a public company may not be able to, because the public company is doing quarterly reports to Wall Street analysts and all that kind of stuff. So, and a couple of other points that he made as I'm scanning my mind map. Um, there were two basic um, like comments made, not sub themes, but kind of. And Dell pointed out that, quote, cloud is not a place, but a way of doing IT. The other thing I heard over and over was about work. And one of their themes was workforce transformation. And they said, quite a few people in keynotes and otherwise pointed out, work is an activity, not a place. Now, some of us in manufacturing, you have to go to the place to do the work, but a lot of us don't have to. Like me, I work from just about anywhere. And as we point out sometimes, the difficult thing is you don't know when to not work. So anyway, so we'll go into the themes that they gave the press, analysts, and influencer community before the keynotes. And the basic theme of the conference was digital transformation. That was a basic theme of Hanover Messe also, for that matter. So we're talking about digital transformation. Dell considers that a business conversation. That's about apps as much as anything. But part of the digital transformation is also an IT transformation. And they're looking at IT really needed to make a transformation in their technologies and in their focus. And one person pointed out that perhaps there's going to have to be a parallel IT to the building the new infrastructure that's needed these days, while the other one runs it in parallel. It's kind of like a guy I know doing a wastewater or a water treatment plant project, building a new one, and he's got to run the old one in parallel with the new one as the new one comes online before they can make the switch over. And I guess that's the same sort of idea. A side note on the IT thing is that I was told by various people, now understand, Dell is an enterprise IT company for the most part, and mostly I talk to operations technology people. But what I heard over and over was that the companies, they'll go into these large companies, and the operations people say that that really they would like for the IT organization to take over more and more of the servers and PCs and other networking technology that operations has been running. They'd like IT to run all that. In other words, we'll draw the line a little bit farther over when you start breaking down the different segments of technology and networking. A second, well, actually a third, we've got digital transformation, IT transformation, and then workforce transformation. And that's where we were talking about work as an activity, not a place. They brought up some surveys of millennials. I just love surveys of millennials because in most of them I go, well, I'm much older than a millennial, but I agree with them. And amongst the things that they said was 82% of millennials would either quit or not even hire in based on the technology that they would be provided to do their job. Technology is important to the millennial generation. I'm betting the generation that follows them, they say, well, they're entering the workforce. Actually, millennials should be taking over stuff now because that includes 30-year-olds and early 30s, and they're old enough to be assuming some pretty good responsibilities, I think, or they darn well better be. And the fourth transformation we talk about is security transformation. And they're looking at the fact of all the smart device proliferation coming into enterprises. and that opens more security holes than you can figure out. And one of the applications with Dell is, or one of the companies, I suppose, is RSA SecureWorks, and they touted that as as something part of their security transformation. I've written a couple of times, and I'll just point out that Dell, actually in the last keynote, there's a whole group at Dell devoted to open source projects, and they've done 96 open source projects. And the one I'm interested in, I saw at Hanover. I've written a couple of times about it once I figured out what it is, and it's called EdgeX Foundry. Dell donated a ton of code from their Fuse, F-U-S-E project into this open source project. And what the EdgeX Foundry basically is, the core is a set of microservices that comes from Dell, from the Fuse project. And these microservices serve to connect, if you will, open connectivity of all the different protocols. There's such a proliferation of protocols, and there's no central place to like connect everything. And this would take, for example, maybe HART, Profinet, and OPC, and other things like that could connect into it, and then connect to all the apps that need to be connected to, maybe an MES or an ERP or some other kind of app, or analytics or visualization or wherever it goes. But you need this kind of core layer that replaces drivers, that does a lot of stuff automatically, and it does it automatically because all of the things that connect to it are standards. So when you have standards with open APIs and open interoperable connections, then you can start to do some really meaningful stuff. Let's see, what else do we have here as I run through that? So the EdgeX Foundry is interesting. When I talked to Kevin Terwilliger, one of the IoT team there, he was talking about, especially to point out that they now have an IoT advisory consulting service to help customers get into Internet of Things. A lot of customers are studying it and they want to know what to do, but they just, they're not so sure they could do it all on their own. So you can hire somebody who's been there before. Dell EMC is there to help them out. I talked for quite a while, very interesting chat with a gentleman by the name of Liam Quinn, who's the CTO of the IoT group and works in the CTO office. And so it was a bit of a futuristic kind of thing, as you often get with chief technology officer type people. He gave me, I put it into an equation, which is kind of interesting. It's almost like something in algebra that I remember from umpteen years ago. But it's kind of like, he says, IoT is a modern word, and it's really like the intersection of IT and OT. So it's kind of interesting. If you intersect IT plus OT, you get IoT. Get it? So anyway, I thought that was cute. And then Quinn was talking about driving, the technology things behind everything that's going on. Systems on a chip, SoCs getting smaller and cheaper and smaller and cheaper, and it's just driving things down to where you can get these things. You can get like a very small piece of silicon with a CPU and memory and modems, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Ethernet, all in a small package. And as that's happening, smaller and smaller devices become smarter and smarter. And as if you're an Internet of Things person, that gets to be very interesting. And Quinn left me with the thought that what's lacking. We've had IoT. Actually, he says most companies are like 80%, all the components and things you need for IoT, but they just haven't put it all together. And it's like even Dell, they had all this stuff. It was the gateway, something that puts everything together, brings it in to take stuff in, push stuff out. But he says what's lacking is a www type environment, World Wide Web, where all you need to do is follow a few protocols. You can get on the web, you could communicate on the web, anybody could communicate with you, and yet you could still have your own proprietary things in your website, for example. We don't care about that, we just want to see it, but if you want to communicate and hook up and talk about automatic hookups and that sort of thing. And one last thing, speaking of automatic hookups, I was talking with Mike Boudreau of Emerson. I think it's called Emerson Automation these days. I know it is Emerson Process Management. But anyway, Emerson was demonstrating a control valve and an instrument, and it's basically a condition monitoring sort of application. And so it's running parallel, so the valve is sending process data to the controller, and this is sending condition of the valve data into an OSI Pi database, and then that's in a Dell gateway, which is right there at the application. So maybe a control valve in a pipeline in a remote area, something like that. So you consider that, and then you got the OSI Pi database collecting data every whatever minute or whatever it takes, and maybe you're doing timeline trends on temperature or something. And then on top of that, then that OSI Pi can go to the cloud, into another OSI Pi in the cloud, and then it can go into analytics, and OSI Soft can do analytics, or other people can do analytics. You can do time-based analysis and timelines and a number of things like that. And then that can send it from the cloud to devices like a tablet or a smartphone for people who want to monitor what's going on and maybe see updates. And then from this is condition-based maintenance, and so now planning can take place, especially in these remote areas that have these control valves. So it's a real live demo. I mean, it's something that actually can be going on right now, and so that's what makes this whole thing cool. It brings the IoT to life, as I wrote in a blog for Dell. But at any rate, working thing, it sends it up, and it's all like from here to the cloud and back down to devices, and maybe back down to maybe even to the control valve, and then they can figure out what's going on for planning, maintenance, and all that sort of thing. A lot of stuff going on. Internet of Things is interesting, and in a sense it's just the old SCADA systems on steroids, but actually the applications are really cool. We can go from excuse me, say that control valve example, over time you could do machine learning, and you could start to do prognostics, and then not just predictive maintenance, but prescriptive things to fix things before anything can happen. That's like the next step up in the maintenance channel as far as that goes. So a lot of cool stuff going on. The third day technology keynote was just out of this world. It was fantastic. I've seen some really good technology keynotes at places like National Instruments, but they don't have the money of Dell, I guess. What a show they put on for their technology and the dark IT night, so to speak. So it's an exciting week. Glad to be there. And so this is Gary Minchell, and this podcast is brought to you by Ignition from Inductive Automation. Thanking my friends at Inductive Automation for supporting the Manufacturing Connection. So have a good day.